I drove 7 hours after a 16-hour hospital shift to attend my parents' anniversary banquet. At the door, my brother blocked me. Close family only. Watch the photos online. Understood, I said, and left. 2 days later, Mom called. Why was the venue card declined? You need to pay the $28 K balance. I laughed and said. I clocked out at 3:17 in the morning. My last patient was a 44-year-old electrician whose oxygen had dropped twice during the night, and I stood at his bedside for 40 minutes, making sure the numbers held before I signed off. The monitor beeped at a rhythm I could feel in my sternum. When the oxygen stayed above 92 for 20 consecutive minutes, I wrote the note, handed off to the night float, and walked to the locker room. 16 hours. I had started the shift at 11 the previous morning and worked straight through lunch, through the code on the 3rd floor at 2 p.m., through the vent check at 6, through the oxygen drop at midnight, through the second drop at 1:40. My scrubs went into the hamper and I stood under the shower until the hot water turned lukewarm and then cold. The fluorescent light above the mirror buzzed the way hospital lights buzz when nobody else is in the room. My apartment was 11 minutes from the hospital. The bag was already packed. I had set it by the front door Wednesday night because I knew Friday would run long. The anniversary banquet was 7 hours south, and the jacket I bought for it was hanging on the bathroom door in the dry cleaning bag. I pulled it off the hanger, folded it into the bag, and checked the watch. 4:09 a.m. The second hand swept past the scratched crystal the way it had swept for 9 years, since the day Dad put it on my wrist in the parking lot of the community college and said, "You earned every second of this." I sent the money because it was easier than the argument. $4,200 a month. Car payment for Mom and Dad, $1,400. Utilities on the house, $1,100. Dad's cardiac medication copays, $900. The rest covered whatever Duncan said they needed that month. $50,400 a year, transferred on the first of every month from a respiratory therapist's salary of $62,000. I did the math once in the break room, and Ross looked at the number over my shoulder and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The transfers kept me in the family without being in the room. That was the arrangement, and I had stopped questioning it the way you stopped questioning the commute after the first year. Highway, 4:15 a.m. The road was empty, and the headlights cut a tunnel through the dark. 7 hours to the venue. I had told Mom I would be late, that my shift ran until 3 and the drive was what it was, and she said Duncan had everything handled. Duncan always had everything handled. He was an event coordinator at a hotel chain, 27 years old, and he organized family events the way he organized corporate retreats, with a seating chart, a vendor list, and a budget that somebody else paid for. The venue was $18,000. Duncan had called me in January and said he found a hotel banquet hall that could do a seated dinner for 60, open bar, cake, photographer, and a small band for that price. I said yes because I wanted my parents to have their 30th the way they wanted it, and because I had been the one paying for things since I moved north. And because saying yes to Duncan was faster than explaining why $18,000 on a respiratory therapist's salary meant eating rice and frozen vegetables for 4 months. I put my credit card on file with the venue the next day. Duncan's name was on the event contract as the organizer. My name was on the card. The deposit was $14,000, non-refundable, charged the first week of February. I watched it clear on my banking app while sitting in the hospital cafeteria, eating a turkey sandwich I had brought from home because I was not buying lunch for the foreseeable future. At hour 5, the Harrisburg exit came up green on the overhead sign. 2 hours from there, and I would be back in my apartment. My pillow was still dented from where I slept 4 hours ago. I could take the exit, call Mom in the morning, tell her I tried, but the shift ran too long. She would be disappointed, the way she was always disappointed, and the money would still clear on the first, and nothing would change. Duncan would run the party. Dad would give a toast. Harriet would tell someone at church how beautiful it was. Nobody would mention that the card on file was not in the room. I pulled into a gas station past the exit, filled the tank, bought a coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the Reagan administration. stood in the parking lot under a fluorescent light that buzzed the same way the hospital lights buzzed, and I almost got back in the car and turned north. The Harrisburg exit was 2 miles behind me. 2 hours to my apartment. 8 hours of sleep. Monday morning shift. Nobody would know I tried. The car started again and kept going south. Because Dad was turning 60 this year, and Mom had put the anniversary photos from year 1 and year 10 and year 20 on the mantel in order, and there was a space at the end of the row for year 30. Because the gift was on the passenger seat, and the jacket was ready, and 7 hours of highway was all that stood between me and the door. The exit disappeared in the mirror. If you have ever driven through the night on no sleep for people who expect the money but forget the miles, subscribe to Family Secret Tales. You need to hear how this ends. The venue was a hotel banquet hall off Route 30, a low brick building with a covered entrance and gold lettering on the awning. I pulled into the parking lot at 10:42 p.m. and sat in the car with the engine running for a moment. I checked the watch. 23 hours since I started the shift. My eyes felt like they had been rubbed with sand and my back ached from the drive and the 16 hours of standing before it. The crystal caught the parking lot light, and the second hand kept moving the way it always did, indifferent to the fact that the person wearing it had not slept. The parking lot was half full. I counted the cars without meaning to. 32. That meant most of the 60 guests were still inside. I could hear music through the double doors, something with strings, and voices layered over each other the way they sound at events where everyone has been drinking since 7. The banner was visible through the glass, 30 years in gold foil. I grabbed the gift bag from the passenger seat. A framed photo of Mom and Dad from their first anniversary that I had restored and reprinted at a shop near the hospital. I spent 3 lunch breaks choosing the right frame, measuring the matting, making sure the color matched the original print. I put on the jacket, checked my collar in the rear view, and walked to the entrance. Duncan was standing just inside the glass doors. He was wearing the charcoal suit he bought last month, fresh and pressed, holding a clipboard like he was working the front desk at one of his hotel events. His hair was combed. His shoes were polished. He looked like a man who had slept 8 hours and spent an hour getting ready. I was standing on the other side of the glass with red eyes and hospital sanitizer still in my pores and 23 hours of no sleep in my posture. He looked like a host. I looked like someone who had crawled out of a shift to be there. He saw me before I reached the steps. You show up past 10 smelling like a hospital floor, and you think that counts as showing up. He kept his voice low enough that the music covered most of it, but a woman stepping outside with a cigarette and a glass of wine caught the tail end. Close family only, Jasper. This is not your event. You are the card on file. Watch the photos online like everybody else who was not invited. I stood on the steps with the gift bag in my left hand and 23 hours in my legs. Behind Duncan, through the glass, I could see the ballroom. White tablecloths. Centerpieces, 60 people, maybe more. Dad was at a table near the front with an empty chair beside him. Mom was standing near the cake table, talking to Aunt Caroline. The banner above the stage read 30 years in gold foil. Understood, I said. I turned around. Walked back to the car. Set the gift bag on the passenger seat. The framed photograph inside it was wrapped in tissue paper, and I could feel the corner of the frame through the bag. 3 lunch breaks picking that frame. The engine started, and the woman with the wine glass watched me pull out of the lot from the curb where she was standing. My eyes stayed on the road ahead, not the venue in the mirror, not the door where my brother was standing, just the road and the parking lot exit and the turn signal clicking in the dark. The hotel was 9 minutes from the venue, a Holiday Inn with a vending machine in the lobby. I had booked the room 3 weeks ago for $485, 2 nights, because I planned to spend the whole weekend. Saturday at the banquet, Sunday at the house. 2 days of being a son instead of a transfer. I carried my bag inside, set it on the bed, and took off the jacket. I hung it on the bathroom door the same way I had hung it 400 miles ago, in a life that apparently did not qualify as close family. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and unbuckled the band from my wrist. I set it on the nightstand. The second hand was still moving. I opened the credit card app on my phone. The venue charges were at the top of the feed. I had agreed to $18,000 for the banquet. I scrolled through the line items and my chest went still. Premium bar package. $4,200. Authorized by D. Pruitt. Extended seating and table configuration. $2,800. Authorized by D. Pruitt. Audio-visual upgrade with projection and speaker system. $1,800. Authorized by D. Pruitt. Photographer upgrade from 2 hours to full event. $1,200. Authorized by D. Pruitt. 4 charges. 4 separate timestamps. Each one individually authorized. Each one after the original $18,000 was on file. Total, $28,000. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I opened the dispute portal, selected all 4 unauthorized charges, typed 8 words in the description field, and submitted. Charges not authorized by cardholder. Contact venue. I closed the phone and set it on the nightstand beside the crystal face, still ticking in the dark. The room went quiet. The ice machine hummed through the wall. Sunday, I drove home. 7 hours north. I worked the evening shift on 3 hours of sleep and did not tell anyone where I had been. Monday morning, 6:30 a.m. The break room smelled like burnt coffee, and the heater was clicking the way it clicked every winter when the thermostat could not decide between 68 and 72. Ross was at the table with a protein bar and his phone. I sat across from him and opened the credit card app without saying anything. The dispute was pending. The 4 charges were flagged with yellow triangles. Ross looked at my face first, then at the screen. He set the protein bar down and leaned forward. His wife managed a catering business in Bethlehem, and he had seen enough vendor invoices to know what a legitimate one looked like and what a fabricated one looked like. 4 separate line items, Ross said. He tapped the screen with his index finger, moving from one charge to the next. Each one has its own authorization stamp. Each one has a separate timestamp. Those are not package add-ons that got bundled together. Those are individual calls to the venue. He called them 4 separate times. Jasper, premium bar, on one call. Seating on another. Av on a third. Photographer on a fourth. Nobody does that by accident. That is someone who picked up the phone 4 different times on 4 different days and said put it on his card. I know. That is not an oversight. That is shopping. Ross sat back. He picked up his protein bar, looked at it, and set it down again. What are you going to do? Wait for Mom to call. When she does, I will ask her a question she does not want to answer. Tuesday evening. I was in my apartment eating leftover rice from a container balanced on the arm of my couch when Harriet called. I picked up on the second ring because I had been expecting the call for 2 days. I set the rice down and muted the television. The venue says the card was declined, she said. Her voice had the tone she used when she was delivering information she expected someone else to fix. The same tone she used when the roof leaked and she called me instead of a roofer. The same tone she used when the car battery died and she called me instead of You need to pay the $28,000 balance, Jasper. They are calling Duncan twice a day and he says it is your card. The venue was $18,000. Mom, Duncan said the total was $28,000. The upgrades were for the event. The bar alone was $4,000. Duncan called the venue 4 separate times and added $10,000 in charges to my card without asking me, without calling me, without texting me. He picked up the phone 4 times and said put it on the card. I disputed those charges. That is why the card was declined. Silence. I could hear the television in her living room. Dad was watching something with a laugh track. He would not steal from family, she said. He blocked me at the door of your anniversary and you are defending his invoice. More silence. Longer this time. I could hear her breathing shift. The way it shifts when someone is deciding between listening and hanging up. You are making this about yourself, Jasper. It was their 30th anniversary. Their, not his. Ask Duncan where the extra $10,000 went. Ask him to show you the authorization with my signature or my voice on a recorded line. If he can, I will pay it tonight." She hung up. I emailed the venue and requested the full itemized invoice sent to the cardholder's email address. It arrived within the hour. 3 pages. Every charge timestamped. Duncan's name as the authorizing contact on all 4 upgrades. His phone number listed as the callback on each line. His employee ID from the hotel chain used as the reference code for the photographer discount. He had used his corporate credentials to negotiate a preferred vendor rate on a personal event and then billed the difference to my credit card. The timestamps told the story better than Duncan ever could. The premium bar was authorized on March 4th, the day after I confirmed my shift schedule with the hospital. The seating upgrade was March 6th. The AB package was March 8th. The photographer was March 10th, 4 days before the deposit cleared. He spaced them out, 1 call every 2 days. He knew the charges would not trigger a fraud alert because they were coming from the same venue where the original authorization was on file. He planned it the way someone plans something they know they should not be doing. I screenshot every page, every timestamp, every authorization. Saved them in a folder on my phone labeled March 1. Closed the app. Finished the rice. Set my alarm for 5:45. If someone in your family has ever treated your money like a subscription they forgot to cancel, subscribe to Family Secret Tales. This is far from over. Thursday evening. My phone rang while I was charting at the nurse's station. Eve's name on the screen. Eve was my cousin on Dad's side, 29, worked at a dental office in Lancaster. We talked maybe 3 times a year. She had never called me on a Thursday. "I need to tell you something about the banquet," she said. I walked to the stairwell and sat on the top step. "I got there late," Eve said, around 9:45. "I was parking when I saw your car pulling out of the lot. I thought you were leaving early. I went inside and asked Duncan where you went. He said you changed your mind. He said I changed my mind. He said you called him that morning and told him you could not make it, but you wanted to cover the whole thing as your gift to Mom and Dad." I pressed the phone against my ear. The stairwell was cold, and the concrete walls made every sound sharper. During the toasts, Eve continued. Duncan stood up. He had a microphone. He said, "My brother Jasper could not be here tonight, but he wanted you all to know that covering this event is his gift to Mom and Dad for 30 years of love." He paused for effect, and then he said, "Jasper insists." The whole room clapped. Your Aunt Barbara was crying. Your father raised his glass. Someone at the back table said, "That is a good brother." I looked around the room and every single person was nodding. 60 people. 60 people heard my brother stand up and tell them I chose not to come, but chose to pay for everything. Dad raised his glass to a story Duncan invented while I was standing on the steps outside with a gift bag and 23 hours of no sleep in my legs. Every person in that room went home believing I was a generous son who sent money instead of showing up. The version of me Duncan wanted them to see. The card on file. Not a brother, not a son. A funding source with a nice story attached to it. "Eve," I said. I was at the door. I was standing on the steps at 10:42 with a gift bag in my hand. Duncan told me it was close family only. He told me to watch the photos online. She was quiet for a long time. I could hear her breathing and the sound of a dog barking somewhere in her house. "I saw your car," she said. Her voice had dropped. "I saw it pulling out of the lot when I was parking. I waved, but you kept driving. I thought you were leaving early." He told me to leave. If I stopped the payments now, the family would think I was reneging on a gift I volunteered. Duncan had not just excluded me. He had rewritten the night in front of 60 witnesses, turned my absence into generosity, and turned his cruelty into my choice. Cutting the money without correcting the record would make me the villain. I needed someone who was in that room to stand in front of my parents and tell them what actually happened. "Are you free Saturday?" "What are you going to do?" "I am going to drive 7 hours and have a conversation with Duncan in front of my parents. I need someone who was in that room when he made the announcement. Someone who can say to Harriet's face, your son told 60 people your other son chose not to come. Eve was quiet for 3 seconds. I was 15 feet from the microphone when he said it. Will you be in the driveway Saturday? I will be there before you are. I almost called Harriet that night. Her number was on my screen and the words were forming. But if I told her on the phone, she would call Duncan and Duncan would rewrite it again. He would say the door was crowded. He would say I was confused from the drive. The only way this worked was face-to-face, with Eve behind me and every lie pinned to a timestamp. I called Ross. He picked up on the first ring because that is what Ross does. I need Saturday off. Take it. I owe you a shift. You owe me 3. Take Saturday. Ross was not my blood. He was a coworker who shared a break room and a shift schedule. But when I needed someone to cover for me without asking why, he picked up on the first ring. My blood brother had taken my sacrifice and turned it into a standing ovation for himself. The real family was not the one that shared a last name. It was the one that showed up. Saturday morning. I drove 7 hours south for the second time in a week. The same highway, the same exits, the same rest stop at hour 4 where the coffee tasted like it had been sitting since Tuesday. This time, I was not exhausted. This time, I was not wearing a jacket from a dry cleaning bag. This time, I had the invoice screenshots on my phone and my cousin parked in the driveway. Eve's blue Civic was on the left side of the driveway when I pulled up at 1:15 p.m. She was sitting in the driver's seat with her window down and a coffee cup on the dash. She raised 2 fingers when she saw me. Not a wave, an acknowledgement. She was there. Duncan's car was in front of the garage. Harriet and Chester's Buick was behind it. The front door was closed, but the porch light was on, and I could see movement through the kitchen window. I parked behind Eve's car and got out. Eve stayed in her Civic with the engine off and the window down. The front door opened. Harriet came out first. She was wearing the gray cardigan she wore every Saturday, and her reading glasses were pushed up on her forehead. Duncan came out behind her. He was in jeans and a polo, arms crossed, leaning against the porch post the way he leaned against things when he wanted to look casual about something he was not casual about. Jasper, Harriet said. Good, you drove down. The venue is threatening collections. You need to call them and sort out whatever you did with the card. I called them. I disputed $10,000 in charges I did not authorize. Duncan shifted against the post. Those were upgrades for Mom and Dad's 30th. It is their anniversary. You agreed to cover the venue. I agreed to $18,000. Show me where I approved 28. The venue adjusted the package based on the event size. The venue did not adjust anything. You called them 4 separate times. Premium bar on March 4th. Seating on the 6th. Av on the 8th. Photographer on the 10th. Your name is on every authorization. Your phone number is the callback. You used your hotel employee ID for the photographer discount. I held up my phone with the invoice on the screen. Duncan's name highlighted in yellow on each line item. Harriet stepped forward and squinted at the screen. Her lips moved as she read. Duncan's arms uncrossed. He pushed off the porch post and took a step forward. Fine, I upgraded a few things. It is their 30th anniversary, Jasper. What, you wanted a budget party for Mom and Dad? You wanted paper plates and a DJ with a laptop? You live 400 miles away. You see them twice a year. I am here. I did the work. I picked the venue and the caterer and the flowers and the seating chart while you were up there emptying ventilator tubes. You did the work on my card. Without calling me, without asking. $10,000. It was for them. It was charged to me. Harriet looked back and forth between us. Her hand was still on the porch railing. Duncan, did you add those charges? Duncan looked at his mother. His mouth opened. Then, the party needed them. That is not what I asked. Eve opened her car door. She stood beside her Civic with one hand on the roof. Duncan, she said, you stood up at the banquet with a microphone. You told 60 people that Jasper could not be here tonight, but he insisted on covering the event as his gift. You said he insisted. Duncan looked at Eve. His jaw tightened. He agreed to the venue. You said he insisted on covering the full cost. You said it was his gift. Your Aunt Barbara was crying. Your father raised his glass. Someone at the back table said, "That is a good brother." Harriet's hand slid off the porch railing. She looked at Duncan with an expression I had never seen on her face. Not anger. Something slower than anger. Recognition? You told people Jasper insisted? Harriet said quietly. Duncan's eyes went from Eve to Harriet, to me to the concrete. He agreed to cover the venue. He agreed to 18,000. You billed 28. And then you stood up with a microphone and told 60 people it was his gift while he was standing outside the door you blocked. That was Eve. Her voice was steady. She did not raise it. She did not need to. Harriet looked at me. You were at the door? Ask your son. The screen door opened behind Harriet. Chester came out in his slippers and a flannel shirt. He had heard voices and he stood on the threshold looking at the driveway the way someone looks at a room that has rearranged itself since they last checked. What do you mean you were at the door? Chester said. I looked at my father. He was 59 and his hands were in his pockets, and the reading glasses on his forehead were the same pair he had worn for 4 years because he kept saying he would get new ones next month. I drove 7 hours after a 16-hour shift. I was at the entrance at 10:42. Duncan told me it was close family only. He told me I was the card on file. He told me to watch the photos online. A woman standing outside with a glass of wine heard him say it. Chester sat down on the porch steps slowly, as if something had given way inside him that was holding him upright. He put his head in his hands. He did not say a word. He did not look at Duncan. He did not look at Harriet. He sat with his elbows on his knees and his head bowed, and the porch light making a long shadow on the concrete beneath him. His slippers were untied, and his flannel shirt was buttoned wrong, one buttonhole off from the collar down, and he looked smaller than I had ever seen him look. This was the man who spent 30 years climbing utility poles in winter. He looked like someone had taken the poles away and left him standing in the field. You were there, Chester said. He was talking to the concrete. You were at the door, at 10:42. In the jacket I packed at 4 a.m, with a gift in my hand, and he turned you away. He said close family only. Chester lifted his head. He looked at Duncan. His eyes were wet and his mouth was set in a line so tight his lips disappeared. Duncan took one step backward and stopped. Chester did not speak. He looked at his younger son the way you look at something you built, that broke in a place you cannot fix. And then he put his head back in his hands. I unbuckled the watch. I held it in my palm for a moment. The crystal scratch from 9 years of hospital shifts, the band warm from my wrist. I set it on the hood of my car. The second hand kept moving. You gave me this the day I got my license. You said I earned every second. I wore it 23 hours straight to stand at your door. Your other son told me to go home. Harriet's hand was on the porch railing. Duncan had taken one step backward toward the door and stopped, neither inside nor out, his hands going into his jacket pockets and then back out and then into his pockets again. His head dropped. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle working beneath the skin. The neighbor across the street had stopped at his mailbox. He was holding a stack of envelopes and watching our driveway the way people watch things they know they should not watch, but cannot stop. You blocked the door. I blocked the card. The venue charged 18,000. You billed me 28. Find the other 10 yourself. The driveway went quiet. No music, no strings, no 60 voices layered over each other. Just the sound of March wind in the maple tree at the end of the property and the distant hum of a truck on Route 30. Eve stood by her car with her arms crossed. Chester was on the porch step with his head in his hands. The neighbor across the street set his mail on top of the mailbox and went inside. The card is frozen. The monthly transfers stopped this week. Car payment, utilities, medication, every dollar goes through the credit card company's fraud department now. Do not call me. Call them. Duncan did not speak. His hands were still cycling in and out of his pockets. Eve had not moved from her car. The neighbor had gone inside. Chester's coffee cup was on the step next to him, untouched, the steam long gone. Harriet followed me as I walked to the car. Her steps were quick on the driveway gravel and she stopped 2 feet from my driver's door. Your father held you through pneumonia when you were 3 years old, she said. He sat up 4 nights. 4 nights, Jasper. You are going to throw away this family over a credit card? I picked it up from the hood, buckled the band back on my wrist. He held me at 3. Your son blocked me at 32. You never needed a son, Mom. You needed a card on file. Someone who pays and stays quiet and does not ask for a chair at the table. That card just declined. I got in the car. The gravel crunched under my tires and the driveway disappeared in the mirror, and the band was on my wrist where it belonged. The credit card company ruled in my favor 2 weeks later. The $10,000 was reversed. The venue sent Duncan a collections notice the following day. His name was on the event contract as the organizer. $10,000. Payment due in 30 days. He opened it at his kitchen table, read the first paragraph, and put it in the drawer next to the silverware he never used. The caterer's follow-up invoice went to Harriet's address because she was listed as the event host. She opened the envelope standing at the kitchen counter and read the total. She set it next to the car payment notice that had arrived the same morning. $1,400, 30 days overdue. The first missed payment in 3 years. She called the dealership to ask about a deferral. They said 1 month, then repossession proceedings begin. The florist called 3 times. Nobody picked up. Monday after the confrontation, I sat in the hospital cafeteria during lunch and opened my banking app. 4 recurring transfers. Car payment, $1,400. Canceled, utilities, $1,100. Canceled, medication copay, $900. Canceled, I spent 16 hours a day keeping other people's lungs working, and $900 of my paycheck kept my father's heart beating. The son who kept his heart running was the one he let stand outside a locked door. His heart was his own responsibility now. Miscellaneous, $800. Canceled, 4 taps. 4 confirmations. $4,200 a month. $50,400 a year. Gone, I screenshot each cancellation and saved them in the same folder as the venue invoices. Closed the app. Finished my coffee. Walked back to the unit. Eve told 2 cousins what happened at the door. She did not embellish. She did not raise her voice. She showed them the invoice screenshot I had forwarded and said, Jasper was at the door at 10:42. Duncan turned him away. Then Duncan went inside and told 60 people that Jasper insisted on paying for everything. The facts did the work. By the end of March, Duncan was not invited to a cousin's baby shower. The invitation went to me. Duncan texted Eve. Seriously? She did not respond. At a family gathering the following weekend, Duncan's girlfriend Naomi heard the full story from a cousin while Duncan was getting a drink. She found him in the kitchen. Did you block your brother at the door and then tell everyone he chose not to come? Duncan set his glass down. It was complicated, Naomi. He drove 7 hours after a 16-hour shift. He was on the steps with a gift. And you told him to watch the photos online. Then you told 60 people it was his idea. Is that complicated? He was late. He would have disrupted everything. He would have disrupted his parents' anniversary by attending it. Duncan did not answer. Naomi picked up her jacket from the back of the chair. She put her arms through the sleeves and zipped it up. At the doorway, she stopped. I cannot build a life with a man who erases his own brother for a round of applause. You could not afford that party, Duncan, and you cannot afford me. She walked out. She moved back to her apartment the following weekend. Duncan helped carry the boxes, because that is the kind of thing you do when there is nothing left to say. Duncan's employer received a courtesy flag from the venue's parent company about the collections case. The hotel chain and the venue shared a corporate umbrella. Duncan was not fired, but he was moved off client-facing events for 90 days. His next performance review would include the flag. If someone in your family has ever told 60 people a version of your life that made you disappear, subscribe to Family Secret Tales and share this with someone who has been the card on file. Day 17. Duncan called at 9:47 p.m. I was sitting on my couch reading a chart on my laptop, his name on the screen. I almost let it ring to voicemail. I picked up. He said. Then, nothing. I could hear him breathing, the sound of a television in his apartment, low volume, something with crowd noise. It was Mom and Dad's 30th. I thought. 7 seconds of breathing. He hung up. He did not call again. He was not calling to apologize. The collections notice was on his kitchen counter. Naomi's shelf was empty. His HR file had a flag on it. He called because for the first time in his life, he understood what it felt like to be on the outside of a door that used to open for you. But his ego would not let him finish the sentence, and his pride would not let him dial the number a second time. The apology sat unfinished in the air between the line going dead and the silence that followed. Duncan's apartment. The collections notice in the kitchen drawer. The shelf where Naomi kept her books was empty. His phone sat face down on the counter. The Banquet photos were on a USB drive in his desk drawer. He had not opened them. 60 photos of a party where everyone believed his brother chose money over presents, and every single photo was proof that it was the other way around. Harriet's kitchen table collected the cost. 3 vendor invoices fanned out next to the salt shaker. Chester's medication copay, overdue, the car payment deferral form, unsigned, curling at the edges. She called me twice in the 2 weeks after the confrontation. Both calls went to voicemail. She did not leave a message either time. At church the following Sunday, her friend Margaret asked about the anniversary. Harriet said it was beautiful. Margaret tilted her head. Then why did Eve tell me your other son had to watch the photos online? Harriet picked up her purse and left before the service started. She skipped the next 2 Sundays. The anniversary photo sat on the mantel in the living room. All 4 of us from 10 years ago, Chester's arm around my shoulder, Duncan grinning, Harriet holding a cake. She had not moved it. She had not added a photo from the 30th. Chester made his own cardiologist appointment for the first time in 3 years. He called the pharmacy about generic alternatives for the cardiac medication. The pharmacist said the generic required a new prescription. He made the appointment and drove himself. He did not ask Harriet or Duncan for help. On the 8th day after the confrontation, he went to the post office on Main Street. He bought a single stamp and a plain white envelope. He stood at the counter for 2 minutes before writing the address. No return address. Inside, one sentence on a piece of notebook paper torn from a pad in the kitchen drawer. I should have been at the door. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I opened it standing at my mailbox in the parking lot of my apartment complex. The handwriting was not straight. The letters shook at the edges, the way a man's writing shakes when he has spent 30 years gripping tools on utility poles and now has nothing in his hands but a pen and the weight of what he let happen. I read the sentence twice. It was the truth he should have spoken that night, standing on the porch 40 feet from the door where his son was being turned away. But one line on cheap notebook paper, mailed on day 8, does not settle the debt of 16 hours and 7 hours and 9 years of transfers and a door that closed in my face while he raised a glass to a lie. I folded the paper and carried it upstairs. I put it in the nightstand drawer, under the crystal and the band. Chester sat on the porch step every evening for a week after mailing it. 7 p.m. A cup of coffee that went cold by 7:20. The driveway was empty. The porch light was on. He did not know if Jasper had read the letter. He did not call to ask. The gift bag was still on the passenger seat of my car, where I had set it the night Duncan closed the door. I brought it inside on a Wednesday evening after my shift. I unwrapped the tissue paper and held the frame in both hands. 3 lunch breaks measuring the matting, choosing the right wood tone, making sure the restored print matched the original color. Mom and Dad, Year 1. Standing in front of a church with their arms around each other. It did not go on the wall. It did not go in the trash. I set it face down in the storage box under my bed. It was a photograph of 30 years I was no longer part of. 5:45 a.m. The alarm. The watch was on the nightstand next to the envelope with no return address. I reached over and picked it up. The crystal was scratched and the band was warm before I even put it on, because the heating vent was directly above the nightstand. I buckled it. Stood, scrubs on the chair. Badge on the lanyard. The hospital was 12 minutes away. My phone was on the charger, and I did not check it. No missed calls, no voicemails, no transfers pending. The second hand moved. It had been moving since Dad put it on my wrist in a parking lot 9 years ago and told me I earned every second. He was right. I earned the shift and the drive and the door and the driveway and the silence and every second after it. All of it was mine. And for the first time in 3 years, every second that followed belonged only to me. I picked up my coffee, walked out the door, went to work.